Hello and welcome to the Hindustan Times Leadership Studio. We're coming to you from the sidelines of the 20th edition of the Hindustan Times Leadership Summit, where we're discussing how industries can envision a new tomorrow. I'm very privileged to be joined by Mr. Vikram Sakhuja. He is partner and group CEO at Madison Media. Vikram, thank you so much for joining us for this conversation.
An absolute pleasure. It's a privilege to be here, actually. I've been a keen follower of the HTLS in 20 years. You come a long way, baby.
We're so glad to hear that, Vikram. So let's really start things off by talking about some of the big disruptive events. And disruptive really is an understatement in describing the pandemic that the world, faced. There was the Ukraine and Russia war, of course, which continues, and the impacts of all these events are far-ranging. We're seeing some of them play out in a massive way, and some of them will perhaps continue to for a long time to come. And we don't know what we don't know changes, right? From a media and advertising perspective, would you say that brand sensitivities to some issues after the pandemic, in the aftermath of the war, have perhaps changed? Are there certain things that they, want to perhaps talk more or less about? And sensitivity issue aside, how do they, just from a humanity perspective, the consumer is suddenly so much more aware, perceptive. We're talking about things like the climate in a much more serious way than perhaps we ever did before. How is that reflecting in how brands communicate with their audiences?
Look, we came across this world called VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, quite some time back, a decade back. But now it seems to be the new normal. So I think the one thing which most marketers, brand custodians, what have you, we have now come to understand that every year there's going to be some major upheaval or the other. Now, if we have to look at the pandemic, I think the biggest impact of the pandemic from a marketing standpoint was the digital acceleration which happened. People just went so much more onto online commerce, adoption of digital. It became truly democratic on the back of also very cheap data costs in India and all that. The other parts, which also pandemic started and then the war and other things sort of exacerbated, was a complete supply chain breakdown which led to huge inflation. And I think large part of 21 was really battling, most categories were battling with huge inflation, which forced them to sort of drop their advertising because it was discretionary to some extent. So now as we speak, I think there is the entire some kind of meltdown of the tech industry. So the private equity funded businesses are now facing a slight winter. And I think that's going to be, let's see, at least from when we talk to some of the big PE guys, they say it's going to last for some time, at least maybe a couple of years, maybe more. So the private equity sort of winter is likely to continue for a while, which doesn't augur well for the so-called .com businesses which were starting up. I think the overall theme which is coming out right now is there's cautious optimism. There is the good part is that India remains a great growth story, and for cross categories, and I think the entire world is looking to India in a very big way. So I think as Indians we can feel very optimistic about it. That said, you've got to pick your battles, because if you just spray and pray, it won't work. So you've got to choose your battles, and it's going to give you dividends. So it's the time to actually, I would say, more than cautious optimism. I'm very optimistic, but it's got to be intelligent business.
Interesting, because all I've heard is cautious optimism from all over the place. So it's good to hear that there is a little more than that at this point in time. And you very comprehensively summed up, the big changes that the media and advertising world saw. And to your point of digital becoming this big theme, everyone did, get holed up in their homes. And of course, consumption on digital platforms was, at perhaps record highs. Did you see that trend continue, or are you seeing now that people are starting to, go out, as much as they used to, perhaps, or are at least starting to? Or do you think that was a fundamental shift that was triggered, and it will continue to reflect in the kind of advertising we see?
Look, firstly, as far as consumer behavior is concerned, people are not shackled to their homes, far from it. I think one thing about the pandemic is that it's been, at least in terms of the impact on people's lives behaviorally, It's not really made. I mean, of course, it profoundly impacted you when it was happening. But once it's
We're
on
out of it
wane, I
now.
mean, you can see the summit today.
Sure.
Hardly anybody's wearing a mask. It seems to be, it's business as usual, and hopefully, touch wood, it'll remain that way. So I think people, I don't know whether it's for good or bad, but they have short memories on these things. So their behavior is not going to get impacted. The reality, but however, what is the media behavior, so to speak, if digital adoption has happened, that's irreversible. So that's going to continue. Now, currently, in fact, we shouldn't even look at digital as a medium. It's digital as a technology. And the mediums really are, look at it sensorially. You've got audio visual. So people consume.
Understood. Yeah.
Yeah, they'll consume AV through TV, they'll consume it through movies, and they'll consume it through sort of digital, online also, OTT, YouTube, what have you. You have text. So the Hindustan Times will be read on a newspaper as well as on the app that I have. So you have different ways, and digital is always a part of it. As we see, whether it's AV, whether it's text, whether it's audio, whether it's image, whether it is experiential, each of them will have a digital leg to it. If I have to just throw a number, today, roughly globally, 30% of all media consumption, the way I define media, would be digital. That will go up. So people will consume more digitally, less analog. But having said that, both will coexist. There will be certain things. For example, I still think for a while, live cricket, people will want to watch it on a big screen TV. Now, if connected TV is a digital way of doing it, so be it. But even then, I think that transition will remain. So I think the both will coexist. I'm not right. You shouldn't write off. You should write off all the other traditional media to peril. It won't happen for a while. But digital is going to play a role. And I think the important point is to understand and tame digital, because digital in a number of ways is also the Wild West.
Sure.
It is highly measurable, but it's also completely unmeasurable.
So talk to me about some of those aspects, the unmeasurable bits.
Look, at a very basic level, if you're talking about was an ad seen. In TV, it's taken us quite some time used to be third-party people coming in and saying, there was verifying that, yes, there was an ad which was put out on that particular time. And then we have some rating systems, independent again, which are coming in and saying that so many people saw the ad. In today's day and age, we really have, whether it's any of these large tech majors, the Googles, Facebooks, what have you, they tell you that we placed your ad, they tell you that we placed your ad in this particular environment, and you have to go with that. Now, yes, there are third-party things which actually try to verify that, but the reality today is media is going on the words of these tech giants and their stuff. I'm not saying that's necessarily wrong, but there is a lot of, it's open to interpretation. What is a view? So, I mean, in a Facebook, if you just going a screen like that and suddenly a video comes on, does that become an impression? Now, markets across the world have put on some kind of norms that need to be followed for viewership. Those things I would still say have not got cemented in stone. So there is a little bit of fluidity that happens, and in the process, possibly I think digital gets away with, like for example, bot traffic. Was your ad watched by a human being or was it watched by a machine?
So currently, there's no definitive way to track that.
No, there are ways, but there isn't a protocol in place which says that you will only pay for what was seen. So that protocol requires a industry body to measure digital measurement. And right now we don't have unlike print and TV and to some extent radio, you can also say, digital doesn't have an industry body measuring it. So everybody's actually doing it. And there's a lot of talk happening, but it's still not happened.
So are we on the cusp of getting an industry body like that anytime soon?
Of course. I mean, as we speak, there is a lot of work which is happening, but it's still not happened. And I think, let's see when that does happen. So cross-media measurement is something which is very high on the agenda. But let's see when that happens. And then there's a lot of other things like performance also. How are you getting your results? Are the results really true? So, I mean, an interesting thing that we just saw with the Venerable Mr. Musk having put a $8 blue tick kind of thing for verification.
Oh, absolutely.
And then just this morning we hear that he has to retract it because a bunch of, including I believe from what I read, Tesla. There's another Twitter account on Tesla itself, the real Tesla or something like that.
Yeah, parody accounts.
And they've taken, parody accounts. And they've taken blue ticks. Now, what am I supposed to do with that? Which is a real one? So, there's a lot in digital which is actually a little murky. It needn't be, but it is right now.
Very interesting. And this is often stuff, us on the outside don't really get to think of much, the measurability, aspect to this, because it's often perceived as this very one dimensional, you'll get a number of views and a number of likes, and, that gives you engagement. But let me talk about Twitter a little bit more. And, I have to get you to weigh in on what you make of, the new sort of direction that the platform seems to be taking. Firstly, whether you think it's an important platform for advertisers at all, and secondly, what kind of advertisers would actually find most value in this platform now that it has, it's now, owned by, an individual with a very strong personality of their own. What does that mean for brands? We've heard so much conversation around brand safety. How do you unpack all of this in the context that this sort of, digital town square might not just stay that way anymore, and all the best parts about it might just change?
Look, Twitter is a massive platform, but I don't think the number of followers it has and the way people use it, I don't think the advertising is commensurate with the popularity of the platform. Primarily because I think it's really used as in a sense, breaking news kind of media. So if something has happened, you just go and see what is the world talking about it, or you're
Right.
commenting on it, and so on and so forth. So at that point in time, now maybe call it lack of the creative agencies who have not found a way to get the magic out of this platform. But it requires a different syntax if you really want to advertise on. You can't take a normal TV commercial or
Sure,
a
and
display
expect it to work
ad or
there.
something and post it. It won't work that well, right? So if, however, you're trying to make it, the entire syntax of a Twitter kind of a platform is different. It's here and now, contemporary. So you really have to come out with, twist your communication also to something which is very, very contemporary, speedy, in keeping with that, which is again
The
the challenge.
moment.
So it's that kind of moment marketing thing. It's not
Yeah.
that easy. So I would say at this point in time, Twitter is there. But it's not such a significant player, at least in India, when it comes to advertising. So will the recent sort of events that have happened, is that going to create a problem? I don't know. I think let's wait for it to sort of. It's probably the most volatile company at this point in time.
Absolutely.
So let's see how they play out, and I think it's going to be wait and watch.
Fair enough.
According to me, I've got a very simple principle in these things. If consumers are following a particular platform or a medium, there is always an opportunity to monetize it, because advertising is going to chase eyeballs. Now, what the value of that is going to be is separate, but it is going to have like when people come and ask me about print, I said as long as print has readers, it's got huge play in advertising. People are writing off print. I'm certainly not. So, I think the important point is I don't write off Twitter, because as long as they have a franchise, consumer franchise, there is an opportunity to monetize. I think the bigger question right now is not what Musk is doing, but I think somewhere the syntax of advertising on Twitter, I don't think has been cracked, which is why it remains a small pie.
Interesting. So while we'll, of course, watch out for what Mr. Musk does next, I think, thanks for highlighting the bigger piece, what agencies and advertisers really need to do with the platform itself in the first place. But it's been a pleasure speaking to you, Vikram. Thanks so much for taking the time out and
Oh,
speaking
my
to
pleasure.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.